Hello and happy, beautiful day to you. On today's episode, I want to talk about the importance of consciousness and not only some of the things that you will want to do, but also some of the places that people make mistakes that actually keep them very stuck. And that's part of the reason what I want to unpack today, just because so often I'll see people start waking up to this awareness of how incredible our minds are, or they've known it for 10, 20, 30 years. And so they're working on expanding their consciousness, but they do so in a way that keeps them stuck. Now, by the way, I have to say, I did this on my own journey of healing. I was expanding my consciousness, looking at things in a different way, but also kind of going to the realms of, binaural beats and just the energy, if you will. And part of what happened is that I didn't have a really grounded way of shifting my consciousness that served me initially. And I see that so often. Sometimes people get on this journey of consciousness and they start to feel like consciousness is a psychedelic experience, or consciousness of different planets and Pleiades and all of these things, which can all be fun and expansive and enjoyable. But when we start to think about consciousness of our planet and consciousness of our body and consciousness of emotions, when we start shifting the consciousness in a grounded way, it becomes pivotal. So let me unpack this a bit more. During my injury, I was expanding my mind and all those things. And you'll hear that people, working with energy and all these things. And for me in my own life, that's what I was doing, and receiving energy and the Reiki and all of these things. And I was stuck and my life wasn't moving. My health wasn't healing. And when I started to get grounded in consciousness, that's when my channel, that's when I healed myself. Then after I healed myself and I started helping others, my channel opened up. So I started channeling information and getting this ability to feel what other people feel after I grounded consciousness instead of just, letting it be expansive. And so, I'm trying to really articulate how to think about this. And one way to think about it is like this. I mentioned that people will start, sending energy and receiving energy and we'll look at energy in an expansive way, and we start to maybe label that consciousness. And again, so often I've seen people that they're, the psychedelics or the this or the that. And again, while all that is fun and can be expansive, if you think about our world in a way of consciousness, if you think about it for a moment, so often people might start to look down on the human experience. They'll say, oh, well, that's just the physical world and that's less cool or less amazing. But when we really look at it, we're literally on this planet that is rotating around the sun. We're sitting on the side of the planet, and our thoughts help create our lives. And when you think about it, when we drive a car, it doesn't feel like we're sitting on the side of a planet. When we're walking around in our houses, it feels like flat ground. It feels like this world is flat. And yet here we are on this round planet. And so when we think about consciousness for a moment and our world, and even what we're manifesting and the way we're seeing life is all in some ways, an illusion, a facade, or when we look at emotional patterns, that too, if we use the example of a woman with an abusive father who leaves him and finds the abusive boyfriend, boss, spouse, etc., we can have absolute compassion for her situation. And what can happen is she might start to have a belief that says, all men are just abusive, alcoholics or whatnot. And of course, they're not. But her consciousness, she sees in that way. Or somebody who's had a lot of painful experiences says, oh, you can't trust people. Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. In my world. But that's the importance, or the point that I'm wanting to make, is that sometimes what happens is I'll see people who have a consciousness that is a consciousness towards people where they feel a lot of pain or hurt or rejection or unloved or life is hard or life is a struggle or whatnot, all of these different emotions or the way that they see life or life is just inferior. Let me go to the energy world. But of course, it is all energy. And that's the insight that I want to invite you to look at is grounding the information, is saying, how can you apply it in a practical way? And by the way, sometimes literally telling somebody who's into consciousness that you want to ground it sometimes looks like telling a teenager they're grounded. They're like, what? It doesn't, you might feel like, but that's the thing, is that when basically I had been doing, the meditations, the frequencies, the energy, the Reiki, the everything, the, expansive, the mind expanding, the recordings, the all of the things. And it wasn't working. And when years of my life, one after another passed me by, I said, okay, I just really need to understand how this works. And so as much as I loved, I was expansiveness and all that, I set it aside and said, okay, how do I get practical? Like what is it? And that's when I started re-looking at the medical journals and say, okay, how do I take the medical journals and help them to, expand consciousness? And how do I take this expanded way of thinking and then combine it with this analytical way of thinking to actually really understand how to just get results? Because that's ultimately all I wanted. And so I took this mixture of, quantum physics with also psychoneuroimmunology and consciousness and neuroscience and just started going, okay, well, where does everything fit? And I got really grounded. And as far as, even psychology and repetition compulsion and reenactments and just understanding the mind. And that's what I want to invite you to do, is because sometimes what happens is when I put something very practical, people say, oh, well, we want the magic, we want the consciousness, and we want the expansion. And I get it. And also when we can put in the practical data, that's when we really create the magic in our lives. That's when we can create the transformation. When we stop and think about it, cell phones are magic, or internet, where we can send an email on the other side of the planet. That's all energy. That's light energy that's working all the way around the planet, or satellites and transfer data back and forth. That's energy. And my point is that telecommunications all has logic around that energy. And so the more we can take energy and mix it with logic, the more we can create magic. And that's the insight that I want to give you, is that, it is, again, you hear me say all the time, healing is a skill. It is. And when we can just really ground the information and understand how to use the mind and work with the mind, that is where the magic is. And so a quick, simple to do. So I want to invite you, just today, even if you walk around and just look at the world in a different way on purpose, like look at it through a new lens with a new consciousness, a new perspective, and just purposely see the magic in life on purpose. See what that looks like, see what that feels like, and see what that lens is, or walk around and look at everybody through the lens of camaraderie, where you feel the sense of connected and connection, and maybe that's it. But I invite you to have fun with this, play with this, because when we can ground consciousness and really expand it and ground it at the same time, it's incredible. It's expansive. So just food for thought on that, to be willing to have that flexible mind programming, that flexible awareness, that expanded perspective and expanded consciousness, but also grounding it and looking at how that can, how you can shift your consciousness in a grounded way. So food for thought. I want to invite you to look at that, to ground it. And by the way, if you are somebody who's really wanting to understand this skill of healing, the analogy you hear me use all the time is that everything, working with our mind is a skill. Healing is a skill. Just like we're all born with the ability to walk, to talk, to write our names. We didn't know how to do that when we were born. We didn't even know where our nose was when we were born. We didn't know how to eat when we were born. We had to learn how. Healing and programming our minds is the same thing. It is a skill. And just like learning how to eat or learning how to walk or talk, we need to learn how to program our minds and how to heal ourselves. And so it's an incredible skill. So so I do have a free training if you want to come join that, that'll give you more and more of the specifics. But the insight that I want to share with you today is just that, is inviting you to the mental flexibility to walk around, to think from a different consciousness, to see relationships or people or life or self just from a different perspective, just playing with that and really also grounding that in a helpful way that can enable you to embrace positive change in your mindset. So food for thought. And part of the reason that I bring this in also is just because I've seen so many people who are grounded and then they become spiritually aware in metaphysics, and then they kind of lose themselves. And I know I did that for a while, but I see more and more people who kind of do that, and then they realize that as they're becoming more expanded in their mindset and maybe happier even at times, where they're feeling happier and more optimistic and more expanded, and simultaneously they feel more stuck in life or not able to manifest healing or create the real change in their life that they're wanting. They feel very stuck there, but they feel very expanded in thinking. And so again, when we really blend the expansion with the logic, that's where the magic is. So just food for thought. And as always, I want to ask you to please do take a quick moment to hit the share button on this episode. Share it with somebody you love, somebody you care about, or somebody you don't even know. Because the more that every single person wakes up to this awareness that we can heal ourselves, and as I learned this skill, I was able to heal myself and then show others how to heal themselves and get incredible results under medical equipment because of understanding the skill. So just food for thought. And of course, I invite you to just apply this information to your life, to really use it. And the more that you're able to heal yourself and change your life, the better this world is for all of us. And so that said, please have an incredible rest of your day. And I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. We'll see you there.